Morning, Year 8. Well, last week I popped back into my classroom. I rushed out again very quickly. Firstly, the first intruder had gone. I managed to snap a quick photograph before I left. Two big eyes staring at me, a shadow on the left of the classroom, and scribed on one wall the words "help me" with 5 scratches. I knew instantly it was a student that had been in there making those scratches. Probably one of my maths students. 5 scratches done in a tally. Obviously a student who'd been doing statistics lately. I was puzzled. But no time to dwell on that for now. Let's move on to today's lesson. And today we're starting to look at data presentation. We've done quite a lot of stuff on statistics, but once we've collected all our statistics, how can we actually present that data in order for people to look at it and to make some sense from it? So our objective for today: can you complete and interpret bar charts and pictograms? Success criteria: bronze can complete bar charts with correct scales, silver can interpret bar charts, and gold can complete and interpret pictograms. Keywords: bar charts, complete, interpret, and pictogram. Quite straightforward at this point. So, as usual, I will do now fast 5 questions, first 2 relevant to our current topic, and the last 3 relevant to previous topics. Pause the video and press play when you're ready to mark. Okay, let's see how you've done. What type of data come from the internet and newspapers? Secondary data. What type of data comes from surveys and experiments? Primary data. And the last 3 all connected. Anyone who got number 3 wrong, hang your head in shame. 8 times 10 is 80. Number 4, 0.8 times 1. Well, 8 goes to 0.8. We divide it by 10, so our answer is divided by 10, 0.8. And now we're dividing 1 by 10 to get 0.1, so we have to take the answer and divide this by 10 to get 0.08. Another way of thinking of it is just do 8 times 1, which is 8, and count up the number of decimal places in the question. We've got 1, 2, so we have to have 1, 2 decimal places in our answer. Okay, hopefully you did alright on that. Let's move on. Now, drawing bar charts. It may seem incredibly straightforward to you, as I'm sure you've done it many times in the past. However, there are certain factors involved with drawing bar charts that if you don't get these all correct, then you're going to lose marks. Quite often people say to me, well, how come a bar chart question is worth 3 or sometimes even 4 marks? And it's because you have to get all of the following things correct. Firstly, the bars have got to all be the same width. Look here, all the bars are 2 squares wide. Secondly, there has to be equal gaps between the bars. In a bar chart, the bars are not touching each other. So notice here, there is a gap of 1 square between each of the bars. It's amazing how many people will leave 2 squares between these bars, 1 square here, and then go back to 2 squares there. Immediately they've lost another mark. A fully labelled axis. That means both axes. So if this is a bar chart here, outlining favourite colours, blue, green, red and pink, you have to label the colours, blue, green, red and pink, and also state that this axis represents colour. The vertical axis always represents frequency. On a bar chart, frequency. You must write the word frequency. Without writing that, even if you've got the numbers completely correct, you will lose a mark. Talking of the numbers, 0 always goes level with the baseline. Then you've got to have equal gaps going up. The amount of times I see 0, 1, 2, 5 with no equal increment between the numbers. And we label the lines, not the gaps. Okay, the lines, not the spaces. So this bar chart here represents the data that's been collected in this, what would originally have been a tally chart, is now just a frequency table. The table shows data on 30 people's favourite colours. Draw a bar chart to represent the data. So we've got 9 people whose favourite colour was blue, 2 green, 7 red, 12 pink. Up until now we've talked about the mode, which in this case the mode would have been pink. We've talked about range, median and mean. Not appropriate in this case because we are talking about non-numerical data. So the first thing we do is label the axes. Then we remember to put gaps between the bars and we plot to the correct height for each bar. Always use a ruler and pencil. Always. The chances are that in an exam question the axes will be drawn for you. Sometimes the numbers will go higher than you've got room to draw, so you have to choose a more appropriate scale. Each square may represent going up in 2s or 3s or 5s in order to fit them going up. Okay, but the essential things are the bars must be the same width. There must be equal gaps between the bars. The axes must be fully labelled and you must have frequency on the axis going up, the y-axis. Can't stress this enough, because if you make these mistakes you will lose 1 mark for each mistake you make. If the question's only worth 3 marks, there's 4 things you've got to get right. Miss out 3 of them, you've got no marks on the question, and they can take quite a while to do, the bar charts. Now, here are lots of questions on bar charts. I do not expect you to do them all, but using a pencil and a ruler, I expect you to have a go at several of them. I would like to think you've got some squared paper. If you haven't, then you're going to have to do your best on lined paper. The red questions over here use very small numbers, very basic. The orange questions, slightly more stricter numbers. Green, we've taken the frequency table and we've put it horizontal, nothing wrong with that. Frequency for pasta is 18, for steak is 7, but the numbers are getting a little higher. We certainly can't go 30 squares up, so we have to use a different scale, perhaps going up in 2s or 3s or 4s. And then our extension ones use much higher numbers, so we've got to think of a scale that's appropriate for each question. But in every case we start at 0 for these particular bar charts. So choose 2 or 3, have a go at them, pause the video and press play when you're ready to have a look and see how you've done. Okay, let's have a look. Right, we haven't got them drawn out, but what we've got is the heights that you should be at for each of the questions in bronze, silver, gold, or red, orange, green, and the extension tasks. But the key things that I cannot stress enough, for everyone, the axes must be labelled, the bars must be labelled, there must be an equal space between the bars, and the bars must be the same width. That's for all of them, Both axes labelled, bars labelled, equal spaces between the bars, and the bars the same width. Both axes labelled, bars labelled, equal spaces between the bars, and bars the same width. Now, for anybody who's particularly good at English, you may have noticed that in every instance here, it's written axis. The plural of axis is axes, and it should have said both axes labelled, not both axis labelled. Okay. Right, let's move on. So drawing a bar chart is a very, very basic skill. Obviously, getting it drawn accurately just takes that little bit extra, but I'm sure you're all well capable of that. However, interpreting bar charts takes you up 1 full grade at GCSE. When interpreting bar charts, remember that the height of the bar is the frequency. So here is a bar chart showing data on people's favourite fruit: apples, pears, mangoes and bananas. To be honest, I've never met a person whose favourite fruit is a mango, yet here we have the mode, most people liking the mango. So the bar chart shows the data on people's favourite fruit. Number 1, which fruit was least popular? Which fruit was least popular? The apple, because it has the lowest bar. Always best to write your reason to explain why you think it's apple. The lowest bar. Now, how many people did actually like Apple? If we look at the scale, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, this is going up in 4s, but it's 4 for every 2 squares. Therefore, every little square counts as 2. So we've gone from 4, this next one would be 6. We're halfway between 4 and 6, so 5 people liked Apple. Question 2, how many people liked pears best? Pears, we go up to here, go across to there, 16 people liked pears best. How many people preferred, nice big word, how many people preferred mangoes to bananas? Well, how many like mangoes? We go across, we're here, it's halfway between 20 and 24, which is 22. 22 people like mangoes. How many people like bananas? Oh, dear me, these mistakes that people make. I should say bananas. And so there's no confusion, let's get rid of that word. There we go. Go up bananas, we're halfway between 16 and 18, so 17 people like bananas, 17. How many people preferred mangoes? 22, take away 17. 5 more people prefer mangoes. Okay, so that's how we interpret our bar charts. On to the questions then. Here are 2 bar charts, one showing favourite takeaways, one showing clothes sold on particular days of the week. Up here we have the questions. What I would like you to do is to answer the questions. Bear in mind these words at the top, how many refer to every question. So how many more people like curry than pizza? How many coffees were sold altogether? How many more coffees were sold on Monday than Tuesday? Remember that this is part of the questions that follow it. Okay, so pause the video and press play when you are ready to mark your answers. Okay, let's have a look. There we go, answers to orange, answers to green. If you've made any mistakes, you might want to go back and have a look and see where they are. Right, let's move on. So now we move on to pictograms. A pictogram is a really nice way of displaying data because usually we use a picture that is related to the data that we are collecting, and it's very easy to see at first glance exactly where what our data is telling us. So here we have a pictogram is a graph which displays information using pictures. Very importantly, you must include a key to be able to understand the pictogram. So many people miss out the key. Miss out the key, immediately lose a mark. Now this table here shows how many goals each person scored in a season. So Claire scored 8, Sally 2, Faye 7, Betty 14. What was the range of goals that were scored? Can you remember? Range is the highest number, take away the lowest number, 14 take away 2. The range of goals was 12. We are asked to complete the pictogram. First of all, we've got to complete the key. Here's our key. We've got a football shown, and we wouldn't be told that it represented 2 goals. We've got to work this out. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 footballs, and we are told that Claire scored 8 goals. 8 goals, 4 footballs. 8 divided by 4 equals 2. So 1 football represents 2 goals. Fill in the rest of the pictogram. Sally scored 2 goals. So let me change the colour to black. Sally scored 2 goals. Well, we know that 2 goals is 1 football. There's Sally. Faye scored 7. Well, there's 2. There's another 2 making 4. There's another 2 making 6. Oh, I can't do 7 because the next one would make it 8. Well, what we can do, we can draw half a football to represent 1 goal. if one full football represents 2 goals, half a football will represent 1 goal. And in fact, there we have a picture to illustrate this. 3.5 footballs for 7 goals. And finally, Betty, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 footballs to represent 14 goals. There's a pictogram. We can immediately see from that Betty scored most goals, Sally scored least goals. We can work out that Claire scored 2, 4, 6 goals more than Sally. We can interpret quite a lot from the pictogram. Moving on. So here are some questions. Now before you pause the video, let me just explain a couple of things. Use the tables to complete the pictograms. For every pictogram you must produce a key. Without a key, a pictogram answer is never correct. Now on the next slide, which I'll show you in a moment, the pictograms are started here. So it tells you the key initially, but for the later more difficult questions you've got to work out the key from the information that's given in the pictogram. So red and orange, you've actually got to just complete the pictogram using the key given. For green and extension, you've got to work out the key first before completing the pictogram. Just pop back to this slide. I don't mind which order you do them in. I don't expect you to do them all, just an amount until you are confident that you can complete pictograms. As I've said, you will probably have to pop between these 2 slides to ensure that you get the correct numbers and you've got the correct layout for the pictogram. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to pause at this point. Do not go beyond any further until you have completed your pictograms, although you may have to drop back a slide to get the numbers, and then when you've completed 2 or 3, let's move on and you can mark your answers. Okay, here are the answers. I'll give you a minute or so to mark them. Okay, if you need any longer, just pause the video until you've marked them, then continue. Right, so interpreting pictograms, final thing for today. In order to interpret pictograms properly, you do need to read the key carefully when interpreting pictograms. So I've still got that on black, I'll take on orange. This pictogram shows the number of drinks sold at a cafe. Our key says that a square represents 4 drinks. So 1 square is 4 drinks, so a quarter of a square will represent 1 drink. Right, so we've got tea, coffee, hot chocolate and milkshake. Which drink was the most popular? We can immediately see that coffee was the most popular. It's got the most amount of diagrams, most amount of squares and little squares in our pictogram. Coffee because it has the most boxes. We don't even have to work out how many coffees sold. We just have to answer coffee. How many bought hot chocolate? We've got 4, 8. Then we've got half a square, and half a square must be 2. Half of 4 is 2. 4 add 2, which equals 10. How many more people bought a tea than a milkshake? There's 2 ways of doing this. There is adding them all together. 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. So we've got 4, add 4, add 4, add 4, add 4, which is 20. Milkshake, we've got 4, add 4, add 4. 4, add 4, add 4. And then we've got 3/4 of a square. Each little quarter counts as 1, 1, 2, 3. Or you could just know that 3/4 of 4 is 3. So we add on 3, gives us 15. And 20, take away 15, is 5. 5 more people bought a tea than a milkshake. That would be one way of doing it. Another way of doing this one, let me get rid of last few. Another way of doing this one. Oh. Right, I wasn't intending all that to happen. Not too much of a problem. Let's go forward to there again. Question 3. Another way of doing question 3 would be to say, right, 4 teas, 4 milkshakes, 4 teas, 4 milkshakes, 4 teas, 4 milkshakes. Here we've got 4 teas, here we've got 3 milkshakes. So there's 1 extra tea there. Let's just put the number 1 in there. 1 extra there. And here we've got 4, none down there. 4 extras here. And 1 and 4 make the 5. So in total, there are 5. 1 and 4. The 1 extra and then 4 extra making 5. Either way is fine. Some questions for you to answer now on interpreting pictograms. Here is the orange pictogram with the key. Here is the green pictogram with the key. And here are the questions. Definitely want you to do all of these, please. Pause the video. Press play when you are ready to continue. Thank you. And here are your answers to the interpreting pictograms question. Okay, so we've actually gone through some quite basic concepts today, bar charts and pictograms. However, it's the intricacies of both of them that mean that it's very easy to lose easy marks if you are not careful in an examination type question. For a bar chart, you must get all that criteria that we mentioned earlier completely correct. And for a pictogram, if you miss off the key, then you're going to lose a mark there. We must not lose the easy marks, okay? Because once you lose a few easy marks, instead of getting a GCSE grade 6, you could end up with a GCSE grade 4. And for a lot of you, that would be a major disappointment. Anyway, I think I've talked enough for today, so well done those of you who stuck it out. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll speak to you again soon. Goodbye.